We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I'm the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am really excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Kyra Seay. She is the inclusive leader, a social innovator, speaker, transformation strategist, lots of different things going on. Kyra, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having me, Christina. As you mentioned, my name is Kyra Seay. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I happen to be obsessed with creating the most optimal environment, department agnostic source solutions that transform business and society for a better future for all. And I do that in a number of ways. I'm a self-proclaimed generalist, so I have competencies in all types of areas of business and life. And I really like to use entrepreneurial skill sets to design solutions that are great for the business, but also have a positive impact on society and people at their core. I have roughly 8 years of experience teaching individuals how to do this as well, influencing systems, culture, organizations for equitable outcomes. And one of my prized creations and experiments is creating a center of excellence model that democratizes diversity, equity, and inclusion, prioritizing it as a company strategic imperative. And in doing that, I've learned so much, and I'm excited to share some of those experiences with you here today on the podcast. And as for the question, younger Kyra is a lot like current Kyra. There's a little bit of flair and just use of brain and intelligence. And so I wanted to be 3-part professional, a marine biologist, a professional dancer, and a film actress. And the only thing that has changed is the marine biology piece. I don't actually like the smell of fish. I love sushi, but almost everything else is completely off limits from a seafood perspective. And I would say I definitely still dance, a little salsa, a little hip hop, and as a huge advocate of showing up as your full self. I even try to twerk on the side. It doesn't really work out for me, but I love to learn about culture and move my body. And am not currently acting, but if Marvel is casting for Storm at any point, I'm your girl. So
there we go. You heard it here. I'm a huge fan of Marvel too. And I have so many questions for you in terms of your experience and just how you kind of create equity and centers of excellence across, organizations, especially in tech and at startups and, in high growth environments. But are there any other ways that you would kind of define yourself, Kyra?
Yeah, I think a number of ways, but the one that I've been talking about the most recently, I'm going to share here with y'all today, because I think it's important for people who come from marginalized communities or underrepresented communities to think about how their lived experience positively defines their professional skill set. And so I would like to serve that context with an experience of my own. My resourcefulness, it stands out in every position I ever had. I'm the there's always a way person. Gets on some people's nerves, but definitely helps the business. So in part, my resourcefulness comes from not having much growing up. Mm-hmm. And resourcefulness is a known valuable skill in the workplace, mm-hmm. Especially for companies just starting out. Getting creative about how you achieve your goals is imperative. And so, but sometimes as people stemming from a marginalized community and or still a part of those communities today, we downplay what we bring to the table if we didn't learn the skill in an employed setting. And some of that resourcefulness mentality is certainly worth unlearning. I have a list of affirmations and mantras that can help with that. I can bring them up at any time. Because you don't want to be restricted or restrained from taking risks. But at the same time, it's a balance, and it's a skill that's absolutely needed in the workplace, especially for high growth startup environments. And so, love to take this moment to speak to those of us who come from those backgrounds to say, honey, you got the goods naturally. Okay. And that the job market is looking for. And to leaders of organizations tuning in, I would add this little nugget to your business case for diversity, and or the ways we win when we achieve workplace diversity. Those people are needed, and when they're present, we win.
Absolutely. When we're present, we win. There's so much research out there to support that. And I love your call to
Absolutely.
action message to leaders. I know, we initially connected because you shared some of your lived experiences as well on LinkedIn in your kind of post around making the brave decision to reconnect with quote unquote parts of yourself that you love, which I absolutely love and very much resonated with. And of course, I definitely want to mention that it is a privilege to like take that time to reset and, before hitting your burning point or after you have hit that burnout point. Can you share why you decided to really take that intentional pause and share that and how that's impacted your well-being?
Yeah, I think I saw recently that Ariana Huffington called the Great Resignation the Great Reevaluation.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also heard people refer to it as the Great Reflection. And in that essence, I see myself. I needed to pause, not purely, but definitely intentionally,
Yeah.
to think about what it is that I want to do and how I want to spend each of my days, and around whom. And I think it's easy to get caught up, and especially when you do the work that I do, and the mission and the impact and the people that you get to work with and love. But at the same time, people who have a care quotient like I do, that I think is extremely high, we get into a trap of putting ourselves on the back burner
Mm-hmm.
and what our needs are, because we're serving a good purpose. And I had done that for too long and needed to face my reality and face myself and say, like, she, looking in the mirror, talking to myself, deserves time, attention, rest, care, the same thing that I was exerting for these organizations and leaders I work for and the people I got to support. And yeah, that's, I just had to do it. And had I made a practice of it for myself, I think I would have been in a very different place. That doesn't mean I wouldn't have needed this time to reflect or to step away or rest. And I think, what I said is less of a directive to, only privileged folks. Take the rest if you can, because, that would be totally out of character for me. I think what I am saying, though, is that I am honored and am in a place that I could step away from work entirely. And not everyone has that privilege. But if we were to dream for a little bit or just for a second, and ask ourselves, right, like, what if it didn't come to that? Like, what does it look like for us to not have to wait until we're about to break to get that rest? And that's the type of workplace that I want to help people create. It's more sustainable, and I don't believe people are replaceable. So certainly works out for the individual, our communities, and the companies.
Absolutely. I saw that by Ariana Huffington as well. And I like the reframe around the great reevaluation and reflection. And I want to reflect on that point you just brought up of an ideal organization. In your experience, if we were looking at an employer who really wants to operationalize resources for mental health and be really proactive about getting ahead of their employees feeling burned out, what would that look like? What resources would be available? And I know that, it's not a one size fits all approach for everybody, but really setting up those non-negotiables to say, we're doing something authentic and intentional to make sure that we are not driving this culture and that we do have resources for people.
I love this question so much, because too often when we talk about burnout and getting ahead of it, we put the onus on the individual experiencing the burnout.
Mm-hmm.
biggest mistake, right?
Mhm.
While it's possible that individuals can take action to work more sustainably and minimize the job's consequences on their health, I think that all of that will mean absolutely nothing if the issues lie in the company culture, as you put it, which is more often the case when it comes to my clients. And so I like to talk about an exercise of um, employee expectations proactively.
Mhm.
Hyper focus on the perceived rather than what's just documented or communicated. So having I don't know, expectation that you only work Monday through Friday, here are the hours. That's what's written down.
Mhm.
Um, that's very different than how your employees perceive they have to work in order to get their jobs done. And so I would have a conversation with employees on a regular basis and totally accepting perceived and what is their reality like. What's expected of you? Are you expected to respond to emails late at night? Are you expected to have your green Slack light visible
Oh,
at
yeah.
all times, right? Despite needing uninterrupted deep work to do your job, right? Like we can't be available to everyone in the organization 24/7 and get our jobs done.
Right.
That's unrealistic.
Yeah.
But if that's the expectation, perceived or real, communicated or not, um, that's a culture issue,
Mhm.
right? Does your manager or your counterpart, right, visibly work weekends regularly? Talk
Mhm.
about that pressure. And so, like, if that's what it's required for them to get their job done or excel at their job, you don't have enough people on that team. Your plans and projects are scoped incorrectly, right? And so, um, we, I would start with conversation around expectations, and that will help you really get to the source of kind of the hustle culture that inevitably leads us to burnout and turnover and very unhappy employees. So start there. That's probably the most unique piece of feedback that I can give. The rest around operationalizing resources, have some. That's
Yeah.
start there. Yeah. Mental health is health, absolutely. A culture of feedback,
Yeah.
celebrated feedback is important. And then, be flexible. To your point, there's not a one size fits all.
Right.
You'll have parents in the workplace that need different resources. You have people from communities that are being targeted right now violently, and they may need different resources to show up to work
Mhm.
fully. And that needs to be ready and prepared for when we're talking about preparing the space for people of all different backgrounds. You have to be flexible with your resources. So that's kind of where I would start.
Absolutely. I think those are some really good key insights there and really, talking about the personalization of the employee experience, opening up the conversation for feedback that's constructive, positive, negative, anything in between, and then recognizing, okay, what are our like written norms, so what's actually happening. It doesn't matter if, you say you're working 9 to 5, but your manager is slacking you at 11 p.m. and you're getting all of these things happening, and that modeling behavior is so important. And then also
So important.
piece too. Yeah. If you say you don't want that culture, how are you going to get to that future state? What do you mean by the words you're saying? I know we talked about this too in terms of high growth environments. There are certain workplace phrases that are pretty relevant in the tech space. And I wanted to get your opinion on these words and quote unquote frameworks and the impact on culture. And the first is, of course, fail fast. What are your thoughts?
As an innovator, there's so much about this phrase that I absolutely love,
Mhm.
because what it's trying to do, what the intent is to ungrip our unhealthy attachment to avoiding failure.
Mhm.
And the truth is when you're looking for new solutions, a new way of doing things, there will be failure. And so the goal is to get people to become comfortable with failing, one, getting us closer to something that will not fail, um, but two, creating a culture where you're not walking on eggshells all the time, right? Like it's okay, and we welcome and celebrate, a mistake, because that is an opportunity to learn. And so, absolutely here for that. When we talk about impact on culture, there are areas of the business where this certainly cannot apply.
Mm-hmm.
And drawing that line of where that exists is really important, mostly because of, the phrase in and of itself, fail and fast. Think of marketing. Right now, we are hyper aware of what brands we want to support, and why, and what brands, if they make a mistake and or do something that feels like a negative impact to a community, for example, we will certainly take our dollars elsewhere. And so when you think about marketing, you do need an enclosed, experimental state, to educate yourselves, because failing out in the market can have serious consequences if we're attempting to try something quickly with a slight disregard for whether or not it has the impact you intend to have. It can cause great harm to individuals and to the brand. HR is another place where this phrase or culture should not thrive for obvious reasons. And then, if anything, I take issue with the speed at which to fail, because I think moving slowly, you can learn a lot more than when you have this constant just expectation to do something fast all the time.
Mm-hmm. I think that
false urgency.
Yeah, a false sense of urgency, fail fast, is not an excuse to not act with intentionality and not, think about your actions, just as, bringing your full self to work is not an excuse to bring your, jerk self to work and not have empathy for anyone else, because your actions have an impact on others internally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, at the business. In terms of, you mentioned HR, another kind of marker of, hiring is that phrase of, we're hiring like crazy, so just hire someone you can go to happy hour with. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my goodness. Several organizations I've been a part of, I work so hard to eliminate one, that phrase being thrown around, because it's encouraging, and even if you're not a hiring manager right now, you get it into your head that you are looking to hire people you want to be friends with and or look like you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't discredit the fact that it's important for you to hire kind people you can communicate with well, who seem to seek understanding in you, and vice versa. And if that was the base of that phrase, I'd be all for it, but it certainly has damaging consequences. So for me, it's part of the big debate around bias, as well as the big one, culture fit versus culture add,
right.
Conversation. And so I think, as gatekeepers to access to employment, which is access to healthcare for some people, societal growth, and professional opportunities, we cannot minimize and that experience. One, because your organization is not going to be successful that way, and then no one has a job, and two, it has very long-lasting impacts. One, on culture, and two, on the individuals that you were saying no to that could have been successful in that role, but because they don't strike you as the type of person you want to drink alcohol with, did not get that opportunity, and that's certainly a failure, and will impact innovation, creativity, and an inclusive culture way down the line.
I've definitely heard people stop using that phrase, but I know there are, folks out there that are still using it as, that marker of someone.
It's everywhere.
It's just something that's there. And I definitely want to take this opportunity to squash that and hear your opinion on it. And this next one is related to both in terms of that, sense of urgency and intentionality. Grow your team as fast as possible. We're hiring like gangbusters. We need butts and seats. Hire, hire. What are your thoughts?
That's also super common.
Yeah.
And without bringing up a bunch of companies that are currently doing that we might all be aware of, and I mean, sign-on bonuses, thousands of dollars. They're just trying to fill the seats, get
Yes.
people in there. Um, Obviously, if there's a need to grow the business, I'm so here for giving people jobs. I'm
Yes.
here for giving them jobs. I'm here for uh, healthcare, all of the things, the benefits that come with that. But if you are building a business that you expect to continue to grow,
Mm-hmm.
you have to make these decisions wisely. Especially the piece that I would like to, there's so many angles we could take this, but the space that I would like to talk about right now is you end up making people managers who are not prepared to be managers. Um, and that in and of itself will have a long lasting negative impact on employees. Those people will not stay in those seats. You've heard the phrase, people don't leave jobs, they leave bad managers,
Yes.
right? So you have to juggle that. And so if you know that your company is on that track, when you hire the first time around, make sure that you're looking for people who have some baseline excitement about growing individuals, um, which is different than just trying to climb to the top.
Mm-hmm.
So we love ambition, we absolutely do. But I'm a people first person, and that's according to the research, definitely the organizations that are able to retain employees, and it makes a good word for you, especially after the great reevaluation. People will have different questions when looking for jobs around culture and relationships with managers. So make that investment early, and don't be afraid to maybe you missed that step, to invest in it later through either coaching or leadership training for individuals as they're filling those seats. And don't forget to talk a little bit about bias in the hiring process and how to make sure that we are making our organizations look like the communities we hope they serve.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely agree with you. Again, you want to make sure that you are leading with intention. The next one is more so a phrase that goes around when you are, in the business, and maybe you're a new hire and you've heard of people you should talk to, and they might be referred to as the first 100 employees to join, or the first 10, or the originals, the OGs. What are your thoughts on this phrase?
I'm so here for us to recognize the folks who have put in some work for us
Sure,
to get to where we are.
sure.
Absolutely. As an activist, certainly, as someone who's familiar with our history, who's all for reparations,
Yeah.
like 100%, we got here because of other people, and honoring that or distinguishing that is not inherently a bad thing for culture. What is bad is when those labels carry so much weight in decision making, creative processing. It becomes this situation that stifles innovation and sense of belonging. Because if you're in a room with one of the 100 or one of the originals,
Right.
uh, guess whose idea matters? The only the only person in the room who has an idea that people are going to pay attention to. It becomes the originals. And
Mhm.
you can expect that would stop people from speaking up in the first place, for throwing out an idea. And so for me, it's okay to know who those people are. If you want to be an innovative place, if you want to be a place that's inclusive and that creates an environment for people to um, participate in the process of making the business better, and dreaming, you have to make sure that it does not become a them versus us, because you will not get that experience, and you won't get those outcomes, which is super unfortunate, especially in the competitive landscape of today.
Well, thank you for contextualizing those phrases or sayings. I think that making sure that we are looking at the weight that carries behind our words and these phrases is important. I do want to go back to something earlier you said around people, the phrase of people don't leave companies, they leave bad managers, and this whole idea around, individual contributors say they want to lean into being managers. I know you have experience being a manager and, being managed by others as well. In an ideal world, what do you think the path is from someone to be an individual contributor, which is very different from leading a team? What does that look like in terms of resourcing and reflection points, I suppose?
Such a good question. I I think that if you are currently in leadership and you have someone who you need to grow into a manager or has expressed interest in doing so, first you should know that. You should always ask, and ask regularly because it changes from time to time, depending on what someone's doing and what their goals are for their life. But so know if that's their path, or at least if there's interest, and then prepare them. Ask why.
Yeah.
If the answer is because I'm underwater right now and I can't do all this work by myself, hear that, but that does not necessarily mean that that person should then step in a manager role and begin to hire folks underneath them. Because as managers, not only are we gatekeepers, we are responsible for the professional growth of those underneath us.
Mhm.
And without some training and experiences where you've been able to get feedback, especially in a high growth environment, you could accidentally be perpetuating a really nasty culture, and getting feedback about a manager from the employee that's on their team can be challenging, especially in American societies. So, in a hierarchical environment. So, I would definitely keep that in mind. And in terms of reflection points, honestly, if someone is excited about helping other folks realize their potential, if they're excited about the component of mentorship, if they're excited about challenge because it won't be easy, and if they can be receptive of feedback, no matter who it's coming from,
Mhm.
then we're on a good road. And then you want to invest in some opportunities to lead, give them some feedback, and maybe invest in coaching or a couple of training sessions to get them started.
Ask regularly, prepare, resource, invest in people. Let's talk about accountability. And you're
Mhm.
looking at leaders and executives, people managers. What are ways that we should look to say, okay, are they effective in their leadership? Are they promoting the professional growth? Are they empowering voices on their teams? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I think there's a couple of parts to it. The one that I think helps me when I'm looking for a new team to join, that I think could help any organization reflect on it as well, is, do the leaders actually on their own invest in their own leadership growth?
Mhm.
Um, a lot of the companies that I work with don't have a board yet, for example. So besides, the founding team, and a few other executive hires, maybe an investor or two, they're the highest levels of leadership. And so when it comes to holding them accountable, they hold the highest power. And so how are you going to get them interested in becoming better leaders? Because we always have to be interested in becoming better leaders if they're not already showing some of that in their track record, because who else is going to tell them? So in that regard, my advice to people, is look for leaders who are investing in their leadership, who are investing in learning about inclusion, are investing in ways to hear from their team in a
Mhm.
way that's non-threatening, and allows them to action on it. And that's probably one of my kind of the biggest key points is, are they on their own or for whatever reason, but in a visible way, committing to being a better leader? And I'm not just talking about leading the business, I'm talking about true people leadership.
Yeah, you have to be authentically committed personally to, doing the work with a capital W and making sure that you're continuously doing that, and not, looking to check the box, say, okay, I'm done growing as a leader. I don't need to do anymore. Because that's not the reality.
CEO, check. I'm a leader, that's not
Leader.
it.
That is
Yeah,
definitely it. I want to pivot to one of your kind of other kind of hats that you wear too around social innovation and really helping organizations, set themselves up for success in that realm. We talked about non-negotiables for mental health resources. I want to ask you, what are non-negotiables that need to be present in an organization that actively cultivates social innovation?
Yeah. I would say always ask who is not in the room
Mm-hmm.
when making decisions. Um, Ask who's impacted and then who's not present in that room. Um, when you're thinking about marketing to a specific community, are they in the room? If not, one, let's have a question about why that is and how we can change that. And then I would also say never stop caring. There's so much going on in the world, but I truly believe for transformation on a global level, companies play a huge role, and it's easy to um, only keep your eyes on one bottom line, but there are several. And as complicated and intelligent beings, we can have our eyes on several, but do have a rubric or format for deciding what gets resourced and focused on first to maximize impact, such as mission alignment, for example, or pre-existing community connections or representation within the organization, right? If your employees really care about something and there's some sort of alignment or connection to what you do as a business and you are not investing in that, that's probably a mistake. I would say a non-negotiable is a time and place to break some things.
Mm-hmm.
Invite it, actually. Honestly, when I think it's Adam Grant, I believe he talks about learning organizations, which is super important, eliminating the idea of best practices, because when you say best practices, that's the top. You've made it to the top. There's nothing better. And the reality is there is something better.
Mm-hmm.
Are you creating the space to dream it? Does it matter in the sense of the context of your business goals or the people that you hire? Those are definitely questions we have to answer, but it's okay to stop doing things the way you've always done them.
Right.
And to create a space where you tell people, break it. Like, we came up with this awesome campaign. What's wrong with it?
Yeah.
And hold the space. I am queen at a lot of my companies for just standing into the Zoom after asking a question, waiting for people to engage, to show them that I'm serious about wanting to hear from them, all of them, including those who are maybe less extroverted. So I love Break It. I just throw it up on a slide and say, okay, this was so wonderful. We love it. Yay. What's wrong with it? We're not leaving this room until we can break this a million ways. And that actually helps prepare folks, especially for crisis comms, or if something is taken a way that you didn't intend, is you've gone through that exercise that this might come up.
Mm-hmm.
And how are we not that? Or how do we shift this a little? Or who can we be in community with or in partnership with to do this better so that we don't cause this harm?
Mm-hmm.
So it just creates a lovely creative environment that's fun. Not everything has to be perfect the first time around, and that's okay and exciting. So let's break some stuff and enjoy putting it back together better than what it was before.
A lot of people have leaned into this idea as business as usual, best practices are out the window because they had to, right? Over the past 3 years with the pandemic, a lot of things, circumstances that we can't control. There's no choice. But we really want to talk about as well that sustainable change and building for the future. So I want to ask how you recommend organizations really measure and track the sustainable progress of organizational transformational change. And what I mean by that is if somebody is saying they want to become less hierarchical. They want to be decentralized and empower ideas to come from everywhere, no matter what role in the organization. How would they kind of say, okay, we are on the right path to doing that? We're not done, obviously, of achieving that goal, but we want to know, are we doing a good job of, achieving this cultural change?
Yeah, I think that looks different. There's no category of measurement that just like here's the metric and it applies across the board. But it's a question you have to ask. If you realize either from a problem or from an idea that y'all have work to do that you're excited to do,
Yes.
you then have to ask yourself, how will we know that we're making progress?
Yeah.
And then have that conversation and it'll look different. And then just make sure you put the measuring tools in place to track that. If it's a survey, it's a survey, and that is okay and very commonplace for these types of programs to be measured. And so I would start with just the question and making sure that you then have the way to measure that prior to starting the actual project or change initiatives. And like I said, it's certainly fluctuates. It looks different. It varies. But as long as you're asking the question, and that, some people say like, how will we know we're successful? And I think that's kind of a setup, because when it comes to this type of work, cultural transformation work, social impact work, the work is never done.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, again, learning organization, no such thing as best practices or yes, we've achieved diversity, equity, inclusion, done. It's just that's not a thing. So you have to be ready to celebrate progress, meaningful progress over time, and keep those investments strong.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we know, even if we are measuring 2 to 3 metrics per goal, for example, when you invest in this type of work, there is benefits that affect so much of the business that you were unable to dream or account for at the beginning of those plans. And so you want to mark those down too and celebrate those, and stay committed to the work, because diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work, for example, is everyone's responsibility.
Absolutely.
And what's lovely about that is because we all benefit.
Yes.
So
we all benefit. I think that is important to remember, and a call to action that there are things that we can do tomorrow to make change, and also looking at progress over time. We've talked a lot about the changing role of leaders and how to measure your own effectiveness, do the work. Is there a must-have that you would say people leaders in the next kind of generation need to have in order to successfully lead and motivate their teams?
We've talked about this a lot, in the sense that a lot of organizations didn't have the choice. Like in today's world, there are just some things, some skills you have to have, some resources in your toolkit ready to activate and invest in for the long term. And for me, when I think of leadership, it's leading with empathy and an inclusive lens. And that's because we're coming out of a very uncertain time. Coming out of might be a strong guess there, but we are currently in a moment of our time, which has lasted for more than 2 to 3 years, where ambiguity is in people's personal lives in a way that maybe it hasn't been before. And with that knowledge, then you add ambiguity in the workplace for whatever reason, right? All the normal stuff that happens in a business that you have to react to and prepare for, et cetera, et cetera. We need leaders who can lead us through that. And empathy is one of the strongest characteristics I've seen that helps the people in these teams feel supported, heard, and can find motivation in the collective, in the community of work, to continue to show up when things get hard at home, get hard in life, or in the workplace, they show up and they want to problem solve. And it's leadership that has empathy, ongoing and consistent, that gets people through that time, but also helps them find a little bit of respite in doing their work. Like, this is actually where some things feel a bit quote unquote normal. And leaders leading by example, modeling behavior for prioritization of self care, um, and having empathy for who knows what is going on in your employees' lives right now. And just starting with humanity is the key. And I don't think that expectation and that desire from employees is going to go away. They're going to continue to look for leaders who can do that, because they know if times do get rough, as they do, they will feel supported, they will feel in community, and will not grow to hate working, but instead find it as a place that where they feel good about contributing some value and showing up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely agree. Leading with empathy, managing an ambiguity, having that growth, open mindset, being open to feedback. Kyra, is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to share with folks who are listening, or maybe underscore 1 to 2 key takeaways for all the things that we just talked about before we close out our conversation today?
Mm. Thank you for that question. Thank you for your time and for this dialogue. I'm just excited to be a part of it. And the only thing that I would really like to add is, I think by listening to this podcast and content like this, that folks are investing in their leadership,
Mhm.
and that signals to me the type of world that I want to live and work in. And so, just grateful for this existing and for y'all's time.
Thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture. I really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you for your time, and we will talk soon.
Absolutely. Take care.
And as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in that employee feedback management as a requirement for the organization to succeed overall. Have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone.